Hey, so I wanted to go over how I go about uh, figuring out how I'm going to trade on the day. I did a video recently about daily levels and how important they are. And I realized afterwards that there's actually a whole bunch of steps that I take prior to reviewing the daily levels and making trades against them that are kind of important to think about. And so I thought it would be a good exercise for me to outline what are the things that I should be doing that I need to make sure that I'm doing every single day prior to the open so that I'm prepared for how I would like to trade a particular stock on that day. So I'm going to pick two or three stocks and just go over off the cuff what I would be thinking and how to trade them. Here's one that I just happen to be on, Taiwan Semiconductor, which is in a longer term uptrend, holding the 200-day moving average and making dips below, but generally holding the 50-day moving average, and is currently in a sharp incline here on the 5-day moving average. And so if I was to look at this, that's the very first thing I do is like, what is the daily trend and what would we be looking for next? Now, the market is not yet closed. It closes in about half an hour, but let's just pretend that that down here on the daily time frame that this candle here that we're currently in is closed. So obviously we did a sharp move up, retraced the entire thing, held the 50-day, moved up, couldn't break that level, set a daily higher low, and then pushed up through it. And today we were opening up lower, much lower. So if you look at, this is the 30-minute time frame, and this is yesterday, and you can see in the morning it was a hard drop down, and you can see the level that was key here to hold is the yesterday low of day. Because if you want to continue this trend upwards, you need to hold that level. If you don't, then you're setting another daily higher low after you just set one 2 days ago, which is not that bullish. If we've all seen bullish charts where it goes up and up and up and up and up, what some people call one time framing, or in the chart guys community we call stair stepping, where the low of each subsequent day is higher than the low of the prior day. And so in order to be really bullish and continue this move upwards, you need to hold that low of prior day. Also worth noting that quite a common thing that I see is that the 4-hour moving average, that's this blue line, this is the 30-minute chart, but I'm looking at a 4-hour moving average, this blue line here. Often that it ends up being what I like to call sort of the mean of the stock. Most stocks oscillate above and below the 4-hour moving average. In a downtrend, they'll dip below it. And then like here, you can see this was an uptrend holding above it. Then we dipped below it, came back up and tested it from below, went lower, tested from below, went lower, tested from below, went lower, came up, tested, broke through, tested from above, went higher, tested from above, went higher. So you can see this happens often. And so I pay a lot of attention to the 4-hour moving average. And some charts are different. Some charts are slower or faster, and you might need to go to a 2-hour moving average. You just sort of mess with the moving average and sort of get a sense for how the stock moves. But I look at this chart today. Let's say I'm going into this tomorrow and I'm looking at it. I can see that it held the low. It held the 4-hour moving average again on this test down. It's not what you want to see in a super strong trend. Is it potentially coming in and setting a daily higher low that quickly, but it did hold the low of prior day. And if you had been trading this today, that would have been an excellent place to get long against that level because your risk is so low. That's the thing. The whole thing about this is if you assume that these tests of the overarching moving average are going to be successful, they're going to hold and push it higher, then your risk on this amount here is absolutely tiny. Like what was the low of this bar? Let's just see. It was 222.77, and the low of prior day is 219.31. So it's $1 that you're risking basically on this $225 stock, and so that your assumption is not only that it's going to push up from there, but that it's actually going to go higher than the prior day here. And like tomorrow coming into the day, I think the way it closes today, this is going to be an inside bar. And so you'll have an inside bar play tomorrow. And that basically means a consolidation after a move up, which if it breaks through, that can give you some another big leg to the upside. So it can also do the same to the downside. Like for example, if it came overnight, came down and tested the lows again, there's a good likelihood that, the more times you test the level, the more likely it's going to get broken through to the downside. But if you're trying to play the current trend on the larger term time frame, the 4-hour moving average there, the move would be up if you want to stick with the trend. And so coming into tomorrow, of course, it all depends on what happens in the after hours and the pre-market session, because you want to know are we like moving up in a big way? Are we completely continuing sideways? Are we testing the lows again? And then you adjust your play depending on that. And so that's in a nutshell. So I'm always thinking about specifically the daily timeframes matter to me a lot, the daily levels matter to me a lot. So the yesterday high of day and the low of day are the big ones. That's why on this indicator that I made, the day trader levels, I by default have this like fuzzy line on these purple spots on yesterday high of day and low of day, because they are more important than any of the other ones in my opinion. And there's lots of ways you can play it, but the open is another one that's super important. But you opened super low here. You could have, like another way you could play it is if it tested this level and it held and then started pushing back up through, you could say, well, if it gets back above the open, I'm going to consider that bullish. And you could play a break of the open with a stop below, that sort of a thing. Anyway, this is a good example of how I would play this chart. Let's go check out Apple, because Apple's been in a downtrend. And this one, it was an interesting one today. I'll sort of go over what happened. Get rid of this. Okay, so here on the daily time frame, let me hide my drawings for a second. Holding the 200-day moving average, so in a slow trend up with a lot of oscillation above it, has struggled with the 50-day numerous times and is currently below it. But it was super extended to the downside. I think it hit daily oversold here on this bottom. So I look at this and I think this could be the bottom right here. It's touching the 200. It's a great place for a lot of people to consider longs, and it hit daily oversold. It was a sharp drop to get there. And so what you need to see to get this thing bullish again is to get this 5-day moving average curling back to the upside. Coming into the day, let's just look at this. So again, the 4-hour moving average, not a perfect hold above and below, but you can see it was holding everything down all the way through here. Got a push above on this little daily lower high here, and then back down below, holds it, back down below. And today was the test. This was the test. Is it going to hold, or is it going to push lower again? And it looks like we're getting a daily lower high again. So looking at this chart, the way it's set up right now, I would be looking for a break of today's low tomorrow. I wouldn't be looking to go long against that low, because the most likely scenario on this downtrend here is another daily lower low. And the fact that it's rejecting from this moving average, pushing it down, that's exactly why you use that moving average to tell you, are you successfully pushing above something and testing it from above, or are you trying to get above it and failing and going back down below? And so, a lot depends on what happens in the after hours and the pre-market session between today's close and tomorrow morning when the market opens again. So we'll have to see what happens in there. But that's how I would be thinking of it going into the close today. Is the most likely scenario from here is a daily lower low, because it rejected there. And so I would not be trying to get long against the low of prior day, because again, we're in a downtrend here. You got to stick with that overarching trend. I did try to get long this name when it hit daily oversold, and I bought it over here, and I think I added on this day here when it went lower, and then I sold it yesterday midday, somewhere up there, because it didn't have the strength that I was expecting it to have. I thought if that was going to be a bottom, we would need more buyers to really pile in and make this thing go up. And then I was kind of kicking myself this morning when it did shoot up on the morning, but the whole time I was thinking to myself, we've got that descending moving average. There's a chance that it could reject there. It wasn't a perfect rejection. You can see it did get quite above it and hold above for a while, but ultimately it failed. I still think this was an excellent trade though, so I'm going to talk about that really quick. So if I go down to the 2-minute time frame here, so here's my day traded levels, and in the pre-market we had been moving up. We were gapping up above this purple line, which is yesterday high of day. So we were gapping up, came back and tested it, went higher, tested it again, and on the open we shot up, and then came down. If you look at this 2 minute, it's an interesting setup. So we opened, set a high, and whenever the day begins, I'm looking at the opening range as it develops. So what I want to see is I want to see a high and a low, not necessarily in that order, on the 2 minute, 5 minute time frame, somewhere in there. I want to see the high get printed. I want to see a low get printed, and then I want to see price fight to make it out of that range that was just developed, right? But as it's doing that, so we move up, set this high, come down, set a higher low, move up, set a lower high. So at this point, I'm like, well, I don't believe the range has been set yet. I don't count this little tiny push down right on the open as setting a low. It really didn't test anything. It just pushed up. This was the first thing that was set, was that high. Then it failed to get down to that low. So this is not the range being developed yet. It went, set a lower high. Then it came down and pushed through that level. And now we've got our bottom of range that was developed, as you can see here on this chart. However, the key to point out here is if I thought this was quite bullish on the open, and I was really kind of kicking myself for not getting involved in this trade because it was gapping up and then it failed to get back down to yesterday high of day before then rallying and pushing through the opening range that it had made. And so this was an excellent trade to take against yesterday high of day for continuation to the upside. Doesn't mean it's going to work, but the risk reward on this is incredible. And I'll do a little drawing on here to show. The risk reward would be something like, knowing what you know about the daily level, you could just put an entry, like a limit order somewhere in here and risk to somewhere below that line. I don't like being very dear with the yesterday high of day or low of day. I call it a level burner when you're playing a price reversal based on a level from prior day. And I don't like to put the stop right below. I give it a bit of wiggle room because so many stocks like to break that level by, depending on their price, pennies or tens of pennies or 50 cents or whatever, and then go back up. And so give yourself a bit of wiggle room, but look at the risk reward on that. It's 8-1 just to get there, to get to the tippity top. If you manage to exit perfectly, that's almost 10-1 on that entry right there. So like as an intraday trade, that's an incredible trade, and definitely worth the risk every time on a stock that, it hit daily oversold. There's potential that it could rally to highs and keep pushing and pushing up for a long time. It could even begin stair-stepping up if the bulls really got behind it. As you can see, they did not. But you could absolutely get risk-free anywhere along here. You could sell a portion of what you bought and then leave your stop there. And even if you get stopped out, which you would have later in the day, you still have a profitable trade. And so that to me is an excellent one. So let me get out of this. And I'll do one more. I was thinking it might be fun to do the QQQs. And get out of here. Back to the 30-minute time frame over there. And I'll hide my drawings. Okay. So the Qs have been a bit of a mind boggler here, where on the daily time frame, let me expand this. So again, very strong chart. This is an incredibly bullish chart. Just look at that hold of the 200-day, never getting below the 200-day, wobbling around the 50, but mostly staying above the 50. We did get that recent dip here where we set an all-time high and set on the daily time frame a lower low, below this low here. Lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. And this lower low was a push below the 50-day moving average, and not a great look for the chart. And I know a lot of people, including myself, were getting pretty darn bearish down here. But what happened on this day where we set that bottom? We had a bearish day here that closed above this low here. But then on this, we gapped down and we went up, right? And so this whole move up has been really, really challenging because we gapped down, move up. And then on this day, we gapped up and moved down. Here we gapped up again and went up because this was basically, on this day, when we gapped up, look at how many people got short here. This is a ton of people getting short. And then when we gapped up, all those shorts had to cover. And so we had a bull day. And then the next day, we gapped up again and came down. And so there's these gaps, and it's really, really tough to trade, right? And so the Qs, I've been finding them quite mind-boggling. Even here, we had this open up on a gap up, come all the way back down, hold the low of this prior day, and then come all the way back up. Here we had, I think this was also a very slight gap up, hold of probably the value area from prior day, and then push back up, and then another gap up the day after that. And then today finally broke this trend down. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days stair stepping up, and today was the first day where we broke through the low of the prior day. And again, what happens? We rally. You know, we get a break for a daily higher low, but we don't really get any follow through to the downside. And again, we don't even really get follow through to the upside because this is just a tiny, tiny little candle here. So this is a tough chart to read. This is a really tough one. And like, how do you play against this? It's really hard. So let's go look at the 30-minute. Again, look at that 4-hour moving average. It's kind of crazy how well this stuff works. Like, so it was holding price down all the way through here. We finally get a move above, try to get higher, and then it did not hold. We didn't even get any good back tests. It just pushed right back through and then gets held down by it again. Test of it, rejection, and then boom, we gap up. This was on, that's got to be numbers. Was it maybe PPI this day? I know there was PPI, CPI recently. Anyway, gap up, move up, and then the back test that comes on this down day here is of the 4-hour moving average again, 4-hour EMA 12, I should say, and then move up, and even today where we had the down day that broke the low of prior day, we didn't even get down to the 4-hour moving average, and now we're holding it above. So it's tough. Like coming into today, I would have bet that we were going to hold it, but we had sort of gapped down below in the pre-market. So when we gap below the daily level in the pre-market, to me, it feels like there's a higher likelihood that you're going to lose that level on the morning. I wouldn't be trying to go long against it there. And we weren't even close to the 4-hour. I kind of want to test this 4-hour moving average and maybe even a hold of some value from one of these prior days. You can see I've got these high volume nodes here to the left that I pay attention to. This would be a good spot. And here to try to get long, this one could work, but not as much. That's if you think you're going to get a daily higher low that quickly. But for a chart like this, what I would really love to see is a flush. I want to see like a flush down to set a solid daily higher low and then get a capitulatory move back up. And so what you want to see is really short-term oversold conditions on a sharp move down, ideally on a short-term time frame, stair stepping down into that move, and then get long against the break of that stair step down into oversold conditions for the move back up. That's my ideal setup that I'm looking for on a lot of names right now, because this move up here, even though it was really tough to trade, it did break this downtrend here, and we're pushing for all-time highs again. So you really want to try to get long in here if you can, but you need a really good setup to do it. And there's no level setups that are really working here on the Qs, and it's been a tough trader through the last few days anyway. So I hope that makes sense. The steps for me are figure out what the daily trend is, look at the intraday supporting moving average, like the 4 hours, see how price is oscillating around it and where you might expect to find support with that. And figure out, are we stair stepping on the daily? If so, it's a high likelihood that one of the intraday levels is going to hold as that trend continues, and definitely be looking at the 4-hour moving average lining up with any of those daily levels that you're trying to play against. And that's it. If you want to stick with the trend as much as you possibly can, and you always want to be thinking about what would be the most bullish thing that could happen, like on Apple here, even though it's in a daily downtrend and you're trying to get long it, what would be the most bullish thing that could happen here on this open? Well, it would be for price to hold the yesterday high of day and continue up, which happened over here. So here on this candle here, this is like what, as we're coming into this downtrending thing, I'm like, what would the bulls really need to do, and where would it need to hold? And think about those things as price is moving, and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to make a play here? I hope that makes sense.